from an industry perspective as well. Hello, we're back with Karen Prevost. You may recall previously we've chatted with Karen, and during that time we mentioned employment contracts. So Karen, with regard to employment contracts, what is an employment contract?
Rick, an employment contract is a document that outlines the terms and conditions of employment between an employer and an employee. It recognises the obligations to satisfy the legislation that an employer needs to consider when offering a job to an employee. And it's also a document that should be signed by both parties so that there's a defined agreement that's been understood by both.
Okay, so what are the legal obligations around an employment contract with regard to the timing? When do we implement an employment contract?
Look, I'd recommend a part of the planning, as we spoke of earlier, Rick, that definitely when you're looking at putting your job description together, you're considering the budgeting of that role. Some drafting up of the employment contract would be very important as a part of that planning. You don't actually need to have the employment contract, obviously, until you've found the person ready to commence work. But obviously it's something that you'd be giving them before they actually commenced.
Yeah, so it fits in with all that preparation we talked about last time.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, fantastic. Terms and conditions, we think about contracts and they have terms and conditions. What would be some of the typical terms and conditions that would be part of it?
Look, I'd recommend that an employer make sure that they highlight the legal obligations, such as defining the relevant industrial instrument. That could be an award or a collective agreement. Also make sure it highlights things such as superannuation, all the legalities that an employer would be obliged to satisfy, as well as sort of anything specific to the role, the wages, how it's paid, when the wages are paid. It's quite a complex document.
Yes.
Probably about when we use a check sheet to actually capture some of that information, and there could be 20, 30 variables that you need to that you need to consider depending on the role.
Yeah, so again, it goes back to that preparation, the budget, all that planning before we start to employ someone, and it really just documents all of those elements.
Correct. I mean, you may decide that you want to there may be medical testing or police checks required as a part of it. That would be a part of the planning when you're looking at interviewing and recruiting that role and the purpose for why that's needed. And then once you employ that person, it's important that you actually document that is a term and a condition of that role that will be required to be done.
So I'm guessing ideally this would cover all employees, if it was casual or part-time.
Correct. Under the new legislation that we're moving into in January 2010, it will be a requirement under the new law that is documented, not just a verbal arrangement.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. There's a lot obviously that goes into that. Is it possible for a business owner to develop that in-house, to write it themselves? What are the obligations there?
Yes, the important thing is they need to make sure that they write it in line with legislation, and that's the trickiest part. I'd highly recommend, if someone is going to consider to write one in-house, that they do get a professional to put their eyes over it to make sure that they have satisfied the terms, that the terms have satisfied the legislation correctly.
Okay, yeah, made that compliance. So if we had to seek some outside support with that, what again would be the recommendations? Is see yourself, obviously.
Look, it might be a few different sources of information that they want to go to, but definitely they might want to capture what industrial instrument applies. They may want to contact somewhere like Fair Work Australia to understand the taxation side of things. They may want to contact the ATO, but to put it all together, definitely an HR professional would be the best place to actually go to put all that information together.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Karen.
Thank you.
For more details on any of the stories from this episode, as well as access to a selection of free resources from Business Bites, including videos and podcasts, please visit businessbites.org.au.
The featured segments in Business Bites contain business advice of a general nature and do not take into account specific circumstances. To discuss your own specific business needs, please contact your local Business Enterprise Centre on 1300 132 232 or visit becnetwork.com.
Thank you for watching Business Bites. See you again soon.